When it comes to the Pokemon generation that introduced the greatest proportion of underwhelming Pokemon, I think we can all agree that it's undisputably Generation 2. In the original Gold and Silver, many of these Pokemon were useless baby forms, very mediocre in stats, or just unnecessarily bad. Over the years, however, a lot of these Pokemon got the big upgrades they needed in the form of better movesets or evolutions, but there are still a lot of them that suffer horribly in their native games. Today, I'll be making improvements to a few of the most underwhelming Gen 2 Pokemon that still haven't received any good treatment. If you enjoy this video, make sure to subscribe. It helps out the channel and lets me know that you want to see more of these Pokemon fixing videos. With that being said, let's take a look at Gen 2's most underwhelming Pokemon. Let's start things off with a starter, more specifically, poor old Meganium. While its stats aren't bad, it really struggles in Johto due to its worse move pool and really unfavorable matchups. If you chose Chikorita at the start of your journey, you were in for a rough time. Meganium has a grand total of 0 good matchups against any of the gym leaders or Elite Four. It's really only good against Chuck's Poliwrath and Price's team, although he can also deal big damage to you. Yeah, that's it. And that's not even mentioning how common poison types are due to the insane amount of Team Rocket grunts you have to face. So it's really hard to make a grass type Pokemon good in Johto, but let's see what we can do. The first change is going to be controversial and many of you might not agree, but I think giving Meganium an extra ground type would really help it out. It's based off of a sauropod, which were some of the largest land-dwelling animals to ever exist, so I think it being tied to earthy traits would be nice. And it would also allow it to have a way to beat the endless amounts of Coughing and Grimer in the Gen 2 games. Now, as for moves, here's where a gentle giant needs to become not so gentle. Based on its stat distribution, it's pretty clear that Meganium is supposed to be a bulky support Pokemon that can still dish out decent damage if it needs to. However, there's a lot of missed potential here in both the status and attack departments. Looking at Chikorita's Heart Gold and Soul Silver level up move list, we can see that it learns Razor Leaf at level 6, which is pretty good for the early game, but it doesn't get any big upgrades until level 32 in Petal Dance. Don't get me wrong, 90 base power is good, but having to be logged into using it and getting confused after is a steep drawback. That's why I think it would be nice to give it a better intermediate stab move than Magical Leaf, like Giga Drain. It's only 60 power in Gen 4, but being able to attack and gain HP is something I feel like a lot of grass starters strangely lack, and it also complements its bulk. For status moves, Poison Powder and Synthesis are a nice start, but for some reason, Meganium just kind of stops learning anymore. I think we can take a lesson or two from Venusaur and slap Leech Seed and Sleep Powder on it. I mean, those flowers need to serve some purpose, right? And finally, we need to address its coverage. It has basically 0 coverage by level up. However, it's got some interesting tutor moves that I think should and can biologically fit into Meganium's level up move list. First off, Ancient Power, since it's based off of an extinct animal, Outrage, since I feel like Meganium can be dangerously powerful if it feels threatened, and lastly, why not slap Earth Power on it for some beautiful ground stab, or just Earthquake in Gen 2. I think with these moveset tweaks, Meganium can actually be a formidable choice for a Johto playthrough. So this one's a bit interesting. I think in the remakes, Noctowl sort of got buffed due to its moveset actually becoming decent. However, in the Gen 2 games, it's completely useless in battle. Even with its moveset buff though, I feel like Noctowl still just doesn't have enough going for it to justify using it in a playthrough, especially when you have much better flying type options. What Noctowl needs is to actually become the silent killer of the night that its dex entries hype it up to be. Apparently, it never fails at catching prey in darkness, but I'm not sure how we can do that with such pitiful offensive stats. Its bulky distribution completely contradicts its design and dex entries. I think boosting its special attack to around 100 will patch up its inability to deal damage. I've seen people say that it should be Ghost Flying, and that would be really cool seeing how there's only one new Ghost in Gen 2, but I don't really think Noctowl quite fits the typing enough. And the other two typings that could fit, Dark and Psychic, are already taken by more fitting birds. So I think Noctowl should stay as just kind of an honorary Ghost type, learning a lot of supernatural moves by level up. But this is where the differences between Gen 2 and Gen 4 really show. You see, without a physical special split, Noctowl's Ghost attack attacks would be running off of its terrible physical attack. So here's where the movesets will kind of diverge. For level up moves in the Gen 2 games, I'd give it Wing Attack so that it has a better move than Peck, and then Feint Attack and Pursuit to showcase its nocturnal hunting behavior, Psychic since it already learns a lot of Psychic type moves, Icy Wind for coverage against Lance, Haste for utility, and to complement its bulk, Moonlight. For the Gen 4 games, for stab, Gust would be better instead of Peck, and Hyper Voice would be a cool normal special attack, and then throughout your adventure, it'll get access to more elemental moves like Ominous Wind, Shadow Ball, Heat Wave, and Will-O-Wisp. Giving Noctowl more moves to showcase its nocturnal characteristics would not only make it more viable in battle, but also give it something unique compared to the other regional birds. Because right now, Noctowl is probably one of the least sought after. And yet again, it's time for another case of an awesomely designed Pokemon suffering from Johto syndrome, and this time it's going to be at the bottom of the ocean. Lantern is probably one of my favorite Pokemon. Unique typing, cute design, cool ability, what's not to love, right? Well, I can tell you right now, its stats. Oh man, they're bad. We have surprisingly great HP, but then everything else is mediocre at best. Now, I actually don't have too big of a problem with its distribution in particular, as it being a bulky, slow special attacker makes sense. But for a mid to late game Pokemon that you kind of have to go out of your way to obtain, the novelty of its typing wears off pretty fast. I'd honestly lower its HP to somewhere around 100 and then boost its special attack by 10 and its special defense by 15. Because, let's be honest, Lantern does not need that much HP. In Gen 2, again, with the physical special split, I'd give it slightly different moves. Feint Attack would be a pretty cool coverage move for Psychic and Ghost types, and it makes sense given Lantern's stealthy behavior. Its association with Light and Rays, as well as access to Signal Beam in the remakes, would make Psybeam and Aurora Beam somewhat realistic options, and would also give it coverage against the many Grass Poison types throughout the main game. For the remakes, along with the previous moves, I think we could get more coverage with Flash Cannon, but more controversially, even Tail Glow. I know that Lantern's light isn't exactly on its tail, but the move description never actually states that the light has to come from the user's tail, and with Lantern's main trait of lighting up the ocean, I think it would very well improve its performance in battle. Maybe with these buffs, Lantern will be able to dazzle more players into using it more, as it's way too overlooked right now. Ah, poor little Sunkern. For almost 20 years, it was stuck at the bottom of the barrel, just a Pokemon to be looked at once in shock due to its pitiful stats, and then never again. But for the few very patient saints who decided to raise this helpless seed, they were rewarded with one of the worst fully evolved Pokemon. Yeah, let's face it, Sunflora sucks. Its special attack stat is actually good, but everything else, especially its speed, is not. Interestingly, in the Gold and Silver beta, it was actually supposed to be a first form grass psychic type that would evolve later on, but unfortunately, for some unknown reason, any trace of decency was thrown out the window upon full release, which is really a shame, so let's fix this incredibly creatively designed Pokemon. Speaking of which, one of Sunflora's biggest problems is its plainness. Being a slow, pure grass type Pokemon doesn't help it stand out from the rest, so why not do it a big favor and make it grass fire? Yeah, it's a bit cliche given that it's a sunflower, but let's be honest, Gen 2 needs more fire types, besides 2 post-game exclusive ones. This would also allow it to destroy Price and especially Jasmine, whose Steelix can be pretty annoying if you're not prepared. It would also pair wonderfully with its ability, Chlorophyll, giving it a speed boost and boosting its fire type attacks. As for its stats, all I'd really do is increase its special defense to 95 and speed to 50, which will make it slightly more usable in battle. But now time for its moves, and there are quite a few toys I'm going to be giving it. Firstly, it needs some fire attacks obviously, so I'd give it Heat Wave by level up and Flamethrower, Fire Blast, and Overheat by TM. I'm also going to give it Earth Power as it's a move tutor move, and it also helps it out against some of its common counters. For quick healing, it would get Morning Sun, seeing as it's active during the day, and this would also allow it to heal most of its health once it sets up the sun. I would also give it a couple of cleric-like moves that tie into Sunflora being a sunflower, such as Aromatherapy due to flowers generally being associated with having a good scent, and Calm Mind since sunflowers are associated with positive spiritual energy. I definitely think these changes emphasize Sunflora's sunflower design, but also getting the buffs that it needs so that it can finally get the attention it's been craving for over 2 decades. Say hello to one of the worst fully evolved Pokemon in history, Ladian. This is probably the most unfortunate of them, seeing how much potential it had. It's a ladybug mixed with an alien that learns a lot of punching moves, yet has completely garbage offensive stats, even for an early game bug type. The only stat that stands out is its strangely high special defense, which doesn't help given that it's a bug flying type. A terrible defensive combo. If Ladian ever wants to see any chance at being a team member, it's going to need a massive rework. So the first step to fixing this broken mess is to give it a major stat redistribution that actually makes sense. I'd lower its special defense all the way down to 60 and boost its physical attack to 95, its speed to 100, and its special attack to 80. And I know some of you are probably wondering about Ariados, and to be honest, while it also sucks, I think that its stat distribution makes sense, so I'd probably just buff its defensive stats a bit more, seeing as it's meant to be a disruptor. As for its moveset, in Gen 2, we get 2 of the elemental punches by TM, but I would actually go a step further and give it all 3 punches as late level up moves. Given its association with the stars and aliens, I think adding Moonlight, Calm Mind, Cosmic Power, and Extrasensory would all also work as new coverage moves. And lastly, I'd give it U-Turn and Drain Punch as level up moves instead of being locked to TMs for some better stab. And as for abilities, Ladian needs both of them changed, as neither are really useful at all. I'd replace them with Technician and Iron Fist, which lean into Ladian's many low power moves, as well as its plethora of punching attacks. But to top it all off, since Ladian learns so many fighting-based moves, why not give it a part fighting type instead of flying? Yes, I know that Heracross does exist, but Ladybug is much easier to obtain, and Gen 2 is severely lacking in fighting types, so this would further convince players to spend time raising what is currently a waste of a Pokemon. But to end things off, let's talk about one of the most forgotten and terrible fully evolved Pokemon to ever exist, Magcargo. It's the Gen 2 Pokemon, only notorious because nobody remembers it's from Gen 2. But why is that? Well, for some reason, Game Freak thought that it was a genius idea to lock some Johto Pokemon in the post-game, including Magcargo. This was sort of remedied in the remakes with the addition of the Slugma egg, but even then, it's still one of the worst fire types to exist, being stuck at about the same base stat total as 3rd stage bug types. That's really embarrassing for a post-game only Pokemon, but not only are its stats pitifully low, but the distribution in particular is awful for a fire rock type. 30 base speed means that you're almost always going to be going second, and 120 defense is less helpful than you think with a 4 times weakness to ground. It's pretty much the worst combination of stats with one of the worst type combinations. So is there any way to remotely salvage this Pokemon? Well, the first change I'd make is pretty obvious. Make Slugma available earlier. I think Union Cave works as a good early game location since the cave is home to multiple fire breathers and Magcargo is part rock, so I think Slugma living in a rocky cave works. At least, it works a whole lot better than randomly being on Cycling Road. Plus, it's a nice way to counter the upcoming bug gym. But even then, I've come to the unfortunate conclusion that Magcargo itself is simply unfixable in its original generation. Being Fire Rock is just abysmal no matter what realistic buffs I give it. Increase its special attack? It's still gonna die to ground and water types. Increase its speed? That doesn't make sense on a Fire Rock snail. So for any further fixes, we'll need to look at the remakes, because what I think Magcargo needs is a major ability change. Flame Body isn't bad, but it's not all that helpful alone, and Magma Armor is completely useless in battle since it's a fire type. This is going to be a drastic change, but Magcargo needs a way to deal with water types, and what better way than to make it straight up immune to them? Its text entry states that water immediately vaporizes upon contact, so why doesn't that happen in battle? Unfortunately, in Gen 4, the only ability that does this is Water Absorb, which doesn't fit its design. So for the first time ever, I'm gonna have to give it a custom ability, which I'll name Corona. It'll be sort of a combination of Water Absorb and Flame Body, making Magcargo completely immune to water attacks, while also having a 30% chance to burn the opponent when hit by a contact move. This pairs well with its high defense stat, but also shields it from being knocked out instantly by a water attack. As for some quick final touches, I think its Gen 7 buff is a step in the right direction, but maybe increase its HP and defense by another 10 points for good measure. And finally, for level up moves, Power Gem for special stab, Charge Beam since Magcargo can probably generate a ton of power due to its heat, and also to possibly get a special attack boost. And finally, Explosion just in case if it's in a pinch. It won't be an absolute powerhouse, and its speed will still make it an easy KO for ground types, but I think these buffs will be enough to at least get players to consider it. Or these buffs would. because that leads to an unfortunate realization. As much as we want to fix these underwhelming Pokemon and give them a chance to live in the spotlight, at the end of the day, these are just hypothetical, or I guess, wishful changes. But seeing how even Dunsparce got a much needed evolution, a small part of me still has a faint glimmer of hope that someday even these forgotten Pokemon that have been left to rot in the bottom of Game Freak's cabinet will finally get their chance to shine, because they all deserve a chance, and likewise, in some way or another, we all do too.